Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to G2 Gaming with the Gundam here. I know it's been a long time since my last update, or my last post. That's because I've been out of the country for quite a while. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I am back and we are ready to go. Get back to the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the actual gameplay soon. But right now, it's time for the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt review. So, here we go. The Witcher 3. Let's get this out of the way. Is there really anything bad I can say about this game? Perhaps, but none of the negatives really weigh this game down. It is greatness, a beautiful open world, the diversity of the enemies and the monsters, the combat, and best of all, the ever so great story. The Witcher 3 combines all of the mentioned characteristics into one game, and I couldn't be happier. For this being the first Witcher game I have ever played, it did not disappoint. There were times where I did not understand some of what was going on, but like the marketing from CD Projekt Red claimed, I did not need to play the other games in order to enjoy this game to the fullest. Like I said in the walkthroughs, I've been dying for a good game to play. I've been dying for a good open world game to play. I first thought that Watch Dogs would be that game, then I thought GTA 5 would be that game. And whereas GTA 5 did not necessarily disappoint, I cannot consider that game to be as great as some may make it out to be. However, The Witcher 3 was that game, and it was not just the open world sandbox features of the game that I enjoyed the most. It was a true RPG, the best I have played since I wasted and burned so many hours back on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic series. Yes, I go that far back because Skyrim was not good enough for me to want to play all the way through, as I did want to do more of the side quests than the main story. The Witcher 3 comparatively made it feel like the side quests were just that, and not more important or more significant than that of the main quest, but more on that later. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this extensive review of this fantastic game. First thing first, presentation and graphics. Despite the great looks and graphics to this game, I would have to say that the presentation is where this game is the worst. Now, that's not to say it looks bad, it looks amazing, at least from a distance. It looks great up close too, but at the same time when you look deep into the presentations and the graphics, there are a lot of visual bugs that the game is riddled with. There is a lot of clipping and characters walking through closed doors, and there are other things in the game that are not completely rendered in 3D. Though that is perhaps a standard for most games, at least of this size, it's an eyesore whenever you find one in the middle of most everything else that looks like it's a 3D model. And though there are a few examples of this, there are some repetitive character models throughout the game. With all of those bugs throughout the game, it just shows you that this is indeed a video game and not real life, as they do take away from at least the earthly realism the game tries to portray. Apart from those negatives, everything else looks great. The main character models are awesome and look awesome. The sunsets are just as majestic as they are in real life, the trees swaying in the wind, the breathtaking views such as Kaer Trolde and Skellige, and the scenery in general added to a fantasy realism that made this game stand out from all the other games with similar settings. Another part of the character models that were standout was every outfit that Geralt was able to be clothed in. Each outfit fit and looked more or less great on him. Of course, there were certain outfits that didn't look cool, and there were some armor, Ursine school gear, that had some clipping issues, like falling inside a roach whenever we were riding, or the hairstyle clipping into the collar of the armor. Some of this may sound nitpicky, but it is something to consider when trying to address presentation or graphical prowess of a game. However, even after all the problems with the clipping and some other issues, it was still not enough to take away from the true experience of this game. You can easily get picky about those clipping issues, but it is even easier to lose yourself on the spectacular views that this game has to offer around its extremely large map. With all of that being said, The Witcher 3 earns a 7 out of 10 in presentation, but what this game doesn't necessarily get right with the presentation and graphics, it gets very, very right with pretty much everything else. Now we move on to the gameplay. One of the strongest elements of The Witcher 3 was the gameplay. I have never played a game that felt or even moved like The Witcher 3. Sure, Skyrim and even the Knights of the Old Republic games had mixed elements of melee combat and magic force powers, but the way The Witcher 3 combined both of those styles made the game fun and exciting to play. And best of all, it was different. That fact alone was enough for this game to stand out to me. I was a little worried about possibly not being able to get used to the style of gameplay, but that fear quickly disappeared as soon as I started actually playing the game. Like most games, the gameplay and the style in which you go about playing a game changes with the difficulty, and because I was playing The Witcher 3 on the easiest setting, I did not have much need for the signs that Geralt had at his disposal. Though I did use the Igni sign and the Yrden signs the most, I did not rely on them a lot because, with me, it's not all about the magic, it's about the melee. A nice added touch to the game was the killer finishing moves that Geralt does. It added to the coolness of the game and the feel of the game. With the brutality of the swordplay, I felt like the game was staying true to that medieval style and era. One of the biggest and most notable features was the ability to pretty much construct your own conversations. It is what a real and true RPG game does. Skyrim does it, the Knights of the Old Republic games do it, and The Witcher 3 does it. I feel like the system in which The Witcher 3, however, works more like it was advertised to work. Every conversation and choice you make, from the way you talk to somebody and what you say, makes a difference in the game. The way you interact with Ciri throughout the game, from the time you first catch up with her to the end of the game, can change the way the game ends completely. It felt really cool to actually be able to change the outcome of a situation and the overall game with merely my words and actions. I felt like I wasn't just pressing buttons, but that I was also forming the world around me and developing all the characters that I came into contact with. Demanding a higher price on a Witcher contract was risky and can turn the employer from being grateful to saying something along the lines of, "Just do that job and leave me be, you blood-sucking, greedy, heartless a-hole." On another example, not doing a few missions altered the ending state of the game, or not doing a mission eliminated the possibility of having a certain character help you during the later stages of the game because of the "you scratch my back, I scratch your back" mentality throughout the game. If you want help from a character, then you'd best to help them. Otherwise, good luck. It will take a lot of weaseling and persuading to get them to help you, and then even that won't guarantee their help. This part of the gameplay was so in-depth that something I had done at the very beginning of the game that seemingly disappeared as quickly as it had come up, came back up almost at the end of the game. This person who I had helped at the beginning of the game had a connection with the person further on in this game, and because I decided to help, it made that character worse off. The relations I had with this other person was strained. He was grateful that I had helped, or at least tried to, but wasn't so sure if he had preferred the person to die rather than live in the state that they were currently living in. The entire exchange was pretty incredible. I hadn't thought about that person until this person brought it up, and then it was nice to see a follow-up to that person that I had helped, even if it was bad. Overall, the gameplay in this game was pretty fantastic. It was definitely a standout of the game and one of the best styles in any game that I have played recently, or perhaps even in my entire history of playing video games. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt scores a 10 out of 10 on gameplay. Need I say more? Alrighty, I saved the best for last. Now we're getting ready to talk about the storyline of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The story. The driving force to most games, in my opinion. For me, it's not just enough to throw in as much action into a game as possible anymore. Sorry, Call of Duty. I have to know why I'm doing something, for whom I'm doing this for, and what motivations there are behind the enemies, my allies, and other main characters in the game. The gameplay in The Witcher 3 is great, but what's even better is the story. Open world games have a lot to take into account. Open world RPGs have even more to consider. Some open world games may be able to get away with a shorter story, but RPGs cannot do that with as much ease. Thankfully, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt does not have to worry about a short story. The main storyline is great and it is long. However, what really makes this story stand out amongst all the other games is the way the side quests and missions and the mini stories come into play with the main story. I noted earlier saying that I felt Skyrim put more emphasis on the side quests of the game than the actual main story. Perhaps for good reason, because that was one of the open world games that had a freakishly short story campaign to it. Even still, Skyrim enticed me to play through the side stories more than the main story, and therefore I never got around to actually beating the game. The Witcher 3, on the other hand, has a bunch of side stories and quests. Each one of them are their own, however, there are quite a few that seem to affect the bigger overall arcing story of the game. It was great to see all the different sides and get to know all the different characters in the game, but the side quests never got in the way of the main story, which is a good thing. Though I felt like I did a bunch of the side quests, there was enough story in the side quests that pushed me back to the main story. For example, the storyline missions with Trish in Novigrad, running around Novigrad with Trish, was a great and fun, indefinite change of pace. However, you do not need to do those missions. But if you choose to do those missions, then Trish will be available later on in the game for help. The side quests offered backstory to the relationship between Geralt and Trish, which for a newcomer to the series was a welcome bit of information. It also shed more light on the actual main storyline than had you not completed the side quest. Furthermore, not completing those side quests would prove to make Trish's life and the lives of her fellow mages a lot more difficult than if you didn't. Even still, after completing the missions, you felt ready to go on to the next part of the main missions. There was a nice chunk of side missions that work similarly throughout the game in every region of the world. Every side story has a reason for it, and it just adds to the feeling that the world of The Witcher 3 is a living, breathing, unique world. I will tell you, it feels like CD Projekt Red has thought of everything when it comes to making this game. Every story within the game, and believe me, there are a lot of them, has a unique arc to them, and it ties in beautifully with the entire game as a whole. And because of that, The Witcher 3 earns a 10 out of 10 in the storyline as well. Overall, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a great game. It is my personal frontrunner for Game of the Year. It is the best open world game I have played potentially ever. The Assassin's Creed Brotherhood was pretty good. The thing that sets this game apart from the rest of the games I have played, particularly recently, was the conversations and the RPG aspect of the game to make your own choices and have each of them affect the entire game, whether good or bad, big or small. I had a couple of friends who got the game, and in conversations with them, I have not found one that has had a similar experience playing the game as I did. Overall, The Witcher 3 gets a 27 out of 30, only losing points for the eyesore presentation and graphics at times. Though they did not take away too much from the game, it would have been nice to have less glitches or bugs on the visual side of things. Now, before wrapping up this review, one more thing I will address is the rating of this game. For all of my future reviews, I will be talking about each game's rating so that those looking to get a game can have a more accurate and unbiased take on the rating system. Many gamers and entertainment gurus know that there are countless games and even movies that have a rating that they may or may not agree on. Some may think that some games are not M rated but are more closer to T or vice versa, and the same holds true with movies. Anyways, moving on to The Witcher 3's rating. It is rated M, and for good reason. The box says that it is rated M for the following reasons: blood and gore, intense violence, nudity, strong language, strong sexual content, and the use of alcohol. I will be explaining briefly the content and extent of each aspect of the rating, but bottom line, I would not recommend this game for anyone under the M-rated age of 17. To start off, we have blood and gore. It is a fantasy medieval game. The Witcher 3 involves a lot of combat and swordplay, and as such there's a lot of blood and a lot of gore. The blood and gore ranges from decapitation to exploding body parts, especially when it comes to bombs. There's a lot of instances when throwing a bomb and it exploding will cause the entire top half or torso of an enemy to blow up, leaving only the legs and part of the spine showing. During those explosions, body parts go flying, and blood goes everywhere. Now, that being said, the graphics do not have blood remaining on the sword, at least during gameplay. So if you stab an enemy, the blood will show and will gush out, but there will be no blood on the sword after pulling it out of the enemy. Another part of the gore is when you're using any type of fire, there is a burning of enemies and you can hear the painful cries of the enemy. So if you're a little bit sensitive to that, probably don't use fire or don't get the game. Likewise, when fighting monsters or other animals, you can hear the pain and whimpers when attacking using fire, or just really attacking with a sword. If you cause damage to them, they will sound like they're in pain. So if you're squeamish to that kind of realism, blood and gore in games, then you have been warned. It is truly one of the more gruesome games I have played, and it is rated M for that aspect. I would probably make it rated M for that aspect alone. Moving on to the intense violence aspect. Much like the blood and gore, this game has a lot of violence, though I would argue not more than Skyrim or any first-person shooter. It has a lot more violence than most Assassin's Creed games, and there is definitely an always present threat of war throughout the game. So the violence is always somewhat present in the game even when you're not engaged in the violence yourself. Again, like I said, the violence in this game is similar to Skyrim, and I don't necessarily consider it to be much different, if at all. And there is not any more in this game than Skyrim or Call of Duty. It is intense, and either way it is important to point out that it has more violence than most T-rated games should, so the M rating is still valid on that point as well. Next up is nudity, and wow, this game does not shy away from it. It is a Witcher game, which I have been told to expect that kind of game from it. There is quite a bit of nudity, way more than average and way more than even Grand Theft Auto 5, in my opinion, which I honestly did not think there was much of that anyways. The nudity in this game is prevalent in multiple places, and it is always included in the sexual encounters in the game, but is not limited to those encounters. Multiple times in the game there are cutscenes where you will see exposed breasts, and it is just a part of the conversation Geralt has with the other character or whatever the case may be. Censors are definitely needed for this game. It is definitely rated M for nudity. I would not want to expose any kid even above the age of 17 to that kind of material, so take my word for it if you shall. The next item on the list is strong language. The language in this game is indeed pretty strong, and it adds to the realism and the grittiness of the game. However, if that was the only thing that the game had, the old Call of Duty games that were rated T had just about the same amount of language in them. That being said, the context and the actual nature behind some of the language used in The Witcher 3 may be a bit more mature for younger audiences. But if you allow your kids under the age of 17 or whatever to watch rated R movies listed for language, then this will not be any worse. Next is strong sexual content. The sexual content in this game is definitely apparent from the opening part of the game. I mean, it opens up with Geralt in a bath, nude, with Yennefer nearby nude as well, reading a book. Yes, okay, that's not really sexual, but nevertheless, their conversation goes in a direction that you can understand where it could have gone and what was happening before the opening scene. On top of that, there are multiple brothels around the world, and there are missions that will have a certain reward, wink wink, for completing them, etc. However, I would not say that it is much worse, if at all worse, than the Grand Theft Auto series. If you're okay with taking on GTA, The Witcher 3 will probably be fine as well. Finally, alcohol usage in the game. There is quite a bit of that as well. However, it isn't as much used or apparent as some of the other aspects mentioned above. You pretty much always have alcohol on you in the game. You can use it as a health replenish, but if you drink too much of it, you'll start to feel it, which is why I never use it to regain my health anyways. You can use it to craft potions and replenish those, which was the most effective and the most important and useful part of using alcohol in this game. Other than that, there are cutscenes where Geralt and his traveling companions will sit down at the local bar and have a drink or two. However, it isn't overdone. The closest it gets to overdone is when Geralt and his fellow Witchers have a bunch to drink on one evening towards the later part of the game and get piss drunk. And even that, at that point, you can intervene and choose to stop drinking there or continue. Either way, it is your choice. I would say, however, that the alcoholic content and use in the game is again no worse than Grand Theft Auto 5 or Skyrim or even Red Dead Redemption. Overall, ladies and gentlemen, this game is rated M, and for good reason. It would be best to keep it out of the hands of children under the age of 17 at least, and perhaps depending on the kid, maybe even longer than that. Your choice. The only way around it is to not play the campaign storyline or really anything in the game besides just standing and enjoying the view. But who really does that in a video game? You're always going to run into blood and gore and violence. Some of the landscape is riddled with burned battlefields with countless dead bodies dismembered, being eaten by predators, or simply just lying on the ground. If you do know the game well enough, then some of the other aspects like the nudity and the sexual content can be more or less avoided. However, needless to say, if I had kids, which I don't, I would not be comfortable and therefore not allow them to play this game until they were much older. there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Leave a like, leave a comment, and whatever else. Tell me your thoughts on the game and whether you agreed with some of my points or whatever else. It doesn't matter. I would just like to get some input from you guys on this game. And tell me what you liked most, tell me what you didn't really like, tell me what you liked the least. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Adios and peace until next time.